Good day. This is Richard Lowe with Author Talks. Thank you for showing up. Uh, I am the Writing King, and I sell ghostwriting, book coaching, and LinkedIn branding services. And I'm here with Annalaura Brown, and she's a health coach, podcaster, and blogger. She's diagnosed with autism at the age of 5 and wrote a book called A Spectrum of Miracles to help other parents and adults on the spectrum. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So, tell me about, if you want to, tell me about this autism diagnosis, and I assume that led to your book.
Yeah, I did, absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said, I got diagnosed at the age of 5, which was pretty young back in the 80s. In the very first chapter of my book, I talk about how when I was 17 months old, I almost died from really severe illness. And one of the complications was brain damage, which led my parents and doctors and everything to be a lot more on the alert for potential problems. And so that was one of the reasons they were able to diagnose me at such a young age.
I gotcha. Yeah. Back in the 80s, they weren't diagnosing that many children with autism, right?
No, not really. And it was kind of everybody was all lumped into one diagnosis, if you will. Now I know I probably would have been more like the PDD-NOS kind of autism, which is like the what they diagnose you when you have a lot of the autism symptoms, but you don't fit into classic autism per se.
Yeah, I have a cousin who's autistic, and my sister sent him into school, and the first thing they wanted to do was put him on a lot of drugs. And she said no. She gave him the middle finger, literally. Pulled all her kids out of school, homeschooled them, and liked it so much she started her own school. And the autistic kid now, he's an adult. He's been through college and things. He's got his own company, graphics art, great artist. You can still tell he's a little autistic, but um, you know, nothing that needed drugs and Ritalin and things. I think they're going to put on Ritalin, which I'm not sure what that does, but it doesn't sound like, I've heard it's not the right drug in any event.
Yeah. Well, Ritalin is used with a lot of ADHD, so it seems kind of crazy to me because unless he actually had ADHD, it would be pointless to consider it. Because that's the other thing too, is that a lot of doctors or in schools or whatever, they try to drug up kids that have autism when sometimes kids you can have autism and ADHD both together, but not always.
Yeah.
Um,
I really don't know that much about it except for what my sisters told me.
yeah.
But I understand it can be tough for parents and probably tough on the autistic kid too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing for me is that I knew I was different, and I was constantly going to a lot of doctors and therapists as a kid. And I come from a really unusual background. My grandparents owned a private school.
Mhm.
So I was at the school that my grandparents ran. So it was kind of, I had unlimited access to a lot of special tutors and schools and things like that. But I was still, in and out of school. I didn't go to school all day long until I was in 6th grade. I only went half day because I just couldn't handle the full school day in a regular school environment. So,
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. Yeah. And you wrote a book. So why don't you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is what the cover of the book looks like. So it's called The Spectrum of Miracles, Hope and Healing for Parents of Children with Autism. And what I did with this book is a combination of things. So some of it is partly my own story, some of it based on, just my own experiences, things that my parents had told me, that kind of thing. Also talking about a lot of the things that I feel like really, really helped me when I was a child. Things like music, things like some of the different therapies I went through, some of the diet changes, things like that. I grew up with parents that really didn't believe in a lot of drugs. My mom was not really a big fan of even using antibiotics unless they were absolutely necessary. And so that's the other thing my mom did that was pretty revolutionary too. Is she took me to a couple of naturopathic doctors and nutritionists and things. And I started on the gluten-free, casein-free diet from a pretty young age, probably around 6, probably about a year after my diagnosis or so. And that's pretty unusual for the time. Now it's pretty common. It's one of the more common nutrition interventions that a lot of holistic and functional medicine doctors will recommend for kids on the spectrum, because a lot of kids on the spectrum have digestive issues, and gluten and dairy are the things that bother those systems the most. And I was on it for quite some time. Then, as I got to be older, junior high, high school, I kind of went off at college. But as an adult, I'm 100% gluten free and 95% casein free. So I'm pretty much almost on it, back on it as an adult as well.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, So how does it help parents understand the spectrum?
So the main thing it helps them with is just gives them basically a story of an adult, of a now adult, and her experiences and what kinds of things she went through. But then I also give some tips and tricks to parents of things that I feel like parents should know. I have recipes that are gluten free and casein free in the book. So there's a recipe at the end of each chapter. Then I also, as an adult, got really into essential oils. And so I have included some different diffuser blends and different things that I have found helpful for different issues at the end of each chapter. And the other thing I also have throughout the book is I have scattered quotes about miracles because I feel like throughout my life, not only was the first miracle in my life was that I actually survived. So I previously mentioned that I almost died as a baby. And so that was pretty miraculous in and of itself. I was in a coma for a whole week. It was really, really bad. I was too young to remember it, but my parents had told me that, yeah, I basically almost died, and it was miraculous that I didn't. And so I've experienced some other miracles throughout my life. So I have quotes from different people that relate to miracles throughout the book, hence the reason why the title is A Spectrum of Miracles.
I understand. I understand. And what do you think, what do you hope anyone who reads it gets out of it?
I hope what they get out of it is that, especially if it's a parent that's got a child on the spectrum that's younger that's reading it, I hope they get out of it that there is hope, that you can help heal your child, that your child can become a functional adult, that there are ways to help your child that are not all about drugs, and that, to look for the little miracles and the little things in life and not necessarily expect to find only these big, grandiose miracles when it comes to their kids.
I understand. So what, just so I understand and our audience understands, what do you think the problem is with drugs in these cases?
I think the biggest problem is that, well, two things. One thing, I think often it's a cover up. And two, I also think that a lot of times it isn't really addressing the root cause or the root problem that helps kids to function. And I also ought to say that I don't really think there's a total cure for autism. I don't think you necessarily want to cure it necessarily. There are definitely some positive things. A lot of kids on the spectrum have very, very good abilities with math or science or language or music or things like that. They have a lot to contribute to the world, and drugs are certainly not going to cure it. And, I don't know that there's, like I said, there's anything that's really going to cure it. But a drug basically a lot of times is an attempt to use chemicals to potentially control the child's impulsive behavior or that kind of thing, instead of maybe going through therapies or other holistic things that can actually really help the child rather than cause long-term harmful side effects. So yeah.
I see. So if the parents just want to have their child kind of become a zombie, then drugs are the thing for them. If they
Yeah,
want their child to
exactly.
actually be productive and turn into a functional, at least partially functional adult, then non-drug therapies might be something to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that said, there are exceptions, obviously. Like if you have a really severely autistic child that's also having seizures, then, drugs may be an appropriate measure or something that may be needed. Or, if a child's got really, really extreme ADHD, then you might need to involve that too. But for your just average, moderate to highly functioning child with autism that doesn't have any of those things, that isn't having seizures, that doesn't have a lot of other medical issues, then, drugs are not really the appropriate course of action, in my opinion.
Yes. Now, what is ADHD and how is it different from autism?
So ADHD is where kids usually, well, it can be kids, it can be adults too, but it's where they just don't have that hyperactivity and the inability to focus and concentrate. Personally, I don't have that. So it's not something that I know a ton about, but it's basically it's a whole different disorder really. And while it can go with autism, it's really not the same thing. So basically it's, I guess where I'm coming from is that drugs are not really a solution for autism in and of itself. Now, if you have a child that has autism and has other health issues, then those may be necessary. But autism in and of itself is not something that you can cure or control with a drug.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Other than just putting your kid to sleep, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's even things like there's a lot of essential oils are actually really good for helping autistic kids calm down and sleep. So,
That's good.
you don't necessarily need drugs for that either. But
I understand. I understand. What motivated you to start writing this book?
So I had thought about writing a book for a long time, and I'd had people ask me to write a book. I'd had people tell me, "Oh, you have a pretty unique story."
You stalled. You still there?
Yep, I'm still here. We somehow lost each other. I don't know what happened.
Yep. Well, let's just, we're still recording, I think. Let me check. Yeah, we're still recording, so let's just keep going.
Okay, so let me go back to maybe let me just start over with explaining how I decided to write the book. So yeah, so I had a lot of people tell me for a long time that I should write a book and that I had a pretty unique story as to, what my childhood was like, what it was like growing up, and where I'm at today. And so I finally just decided to take the leap and write the book. I especially decided to write it after I had become a health coach and started, talking to a lot of parents that had kids with autism and started realizing that, hey, I have some pretty unique things that I could share. I have some things that I feel like are pretty helpful. And so, I just decided to do the book, and it's self-published on Amazon. So I didn't, go through a publisher or anything fancy, but it's definitely been a good thing. I've definitely had some parents that have read it that have told me they've really found it helpful.
Nice. Now, you said you're a health coach. Does that require training or some kind of certification or?
Some people just call themselves health coaches without it, but I actually had a year's online schooling training through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition.
Gotcha. And what does integrated nutrition mean?
So it's an online school that has been around
Oh,
for probably like 25 years now. They're based out of New York. They originally were in person and then they transitioned fully to online probably. Well, I graduated from there in 2014 and they had just gone fully in line probably about a couple of years before that. So what they do is they bring in a lot of different instructors. They have their own philosophy about nutrition and health and that kind of thing, but they teach you how to be a coach. They teach you different skills. They talk about all the different diets that exist out there, lots of different health and wellness trends, things like that, different things that you need to know in order to be able to adequately help coach people with their health. So it's kind of similar to like if you become a life coach or a business coach, most of those people have some kind of experience or background in it, but not necessarily a full academic degree.
gotcha. Gotcha. Um, and you say you included recipes and essential oil blends. What do those do?
So just help improve your overall health. So the recipes are, like I said, are gluten-free and dairy and casein-free recipes. And the purpose I didn't had in putting those is that I said like a lot of parents will put their kids on that diet for at least some sort of a time frame to help them with their overall health. So having those recipes, I feel like was helpful to parents. Plus, there also a lot of them are recipes of things that my mom gave me when I was on that diet as a kid, and so it kind of just is kind of a little bit reminiscing, but also, and quite frankly, there's still things that I really like to eat today to do today too. So like one has like a basic green smoothie recipe, one is barbecue chicken, one is like a stir fry. So, I have one here that's actually buckwheat waffles recipe, which buckwheat is gluten free. A lot of people don't realize that because it has wheat in the name, but buckwheat is not the same thing as wheat.
Okay. Okay. Now, you in your description here, you say that you've experienced many miracles and blessings along your journey. What are some of those?
So, well, the first one is that I'm still here alive today.
That's a good
And
thing.
in really good health. And I talk about a lot of them in my book, and I don't want to give away too much of it, but just different things as far as like, I feel like one thing I was really blessed with was being born into the family I was and having the parents and the grandparents that came from a background in education. Because otherwise, it would have been, I probably would have been in public school on special ed, and who knows, what my life would have been like today. So,
Sure. Sure. But did you have any honest to God miracles that you can think of?
the first one, just that I'm alive. That's
Yeah.
really the main one because I
Gotcha.
almost died.
I understand. That can definitely be a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was born what they call a blue baby, which is a,
Oh,
a low
yeah.
RH factor, and you basically don't breathe. And they had to do a full transfusion on me
Ooh,
when I was
yikes.
born.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that, of course, because it was only hours old. But apparently, it was pretty traumatic for my mom
I bet.
and
Yeah.
father, of course.
Yeah.
Yep. So I guess I'm a miracle too.
There you go. Yeah.
I guess we're all kind of miracles in a way when you think about it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Let's see. You also have a podcast.
I do. And my podcast is for a little bit of a different audience. So in 2018, after a long journey of figuring out a bunch of mystery health symptoms that had popped up as an adult, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. So my podcast, I do some episodes where I talk about different aspects of autoimmune healing and wellness, but I also focus primarily on interviewing different guests. So I have people come on and talk about their journey to get a diagnosis,
Hmm.
what they've done to start healing, where they're at in their journey, what they would recommend to somebody who's just being diagnosed or, has been diagnosed for a while but is still struggling with their health. And the other thing that I have found kind of interesting from some of the research that I've done and some of the people that I've talked to is that a lot of kids that have autism, their mothers have autoimmune conditions a lot of times.
Oh, interesting.
And a lot more adults, especially women that are on the autism spectrum, grow up to have autoimmune conditions for various reasons. And so, they're not totally unrelated. But yeah, on my podcast, I don't talk about autism at all. I talk about autoimmune conditions.
I see. And um, how would a parent know that their child has autism or suspect it?
Well, there's a lot of different symptoms. Sometimes you can catch on if there's like some kind of a family component. Like, if you've got somebody else in the family that's potentially got it. In my case, my parents were on high alert because I had had a disorder that had almost taken my life, as I mentioned, that causes one of the things it does is cause some brain damage. So my parents kind of knew that could be a possibility. But there could be different signs, and the more severe it is, the easier it's going to be to figure out. But a lot of things like if the kid has social challenges, sensory issues, challenges with just some of their, or sometimes if they don't start talking till later in life, different things like that can be signs of autism. But yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, you said you published a book. Why don't you describe your journey of writing and publishing that book?
So yeah, so like I said, I kind of had people tell me they thought I should write a book for, a while. And then once I decided I was going to write it, I still sat on it for a few years. And I think this is pretty common. I think a lot of people don't really actually start writing. They talk about writing a book, but they don't actually do it for a variety of reasons. And so for me, then once I finally decided to write it, I basically just opened up a Google Doc and started, periodically I would start writing things down. Okay, I think if I'm going to write this book, these are the things I want to include in it. Here are some stories, here's some outlines, that kind of thing. And I took an online course actually through Institute of Integrative Nutrition as well, because in addition to their regular, health coaching program, they offer some additional things. And one other thing they offer is an online course on how to write and publish a book. So I went through that course, and while I was going through that course, that was the time when I actually wrote the book. And I basically just kind of would write outlines and rough drafts of some things, and I would start filling things in, that kind of thing. And then so I got to the point that I had kind of a rough draft written, and I have a coach that I work with to help me with some different things on my business. And she has some experience in writing and editing because she'd self-published a few books on her own, used to work for a self-publishing company. So she went through and read it and helped me edit it and made some suggestions. And I changed a few things based on what she told me I should change. So she was kind of my editor, even though she's not on here officially. And yeah, and then I just kind of, started brainstorming titles, a few things like that, and different things like that. And yeah, then I just went through and I hired a graphic designer to put this cover together. I actually found the guy on Fiverr based on recommendations from a couple of people that had used him before, and got the cover done and self-published it on Amazon, and then started promoting it.
Yeah, Fiverr's sometimes a good place to find good help. My profile photos, I got massaged through Fiverr, and it looks pretty good, and I get a lot of book covers through that. Have you published an audiobook yet?
Not yet. I have debated whether or not to do the audiobook. One of the reasons being that I kind of like the idea of doing it myself with my own voice, but then again, I don't know. I kind of haven't decided where I'm going to head with that, so no, I haven't yet. I have it in physical, and then I have it on Kindle.
Highly recommended. I've got all my books on audio, and more than half my sales are through audiobooks.
Yeah, I'll have to
Yeah.
think about that. Yeah.
I would not recommend using ACX, which is the back end to audiobook. Audible has the ability to hire people there and give them a revenue split. Don't do that.
Okay.
You're stuck with them for 7 years, and they
Oh,
start off
wow.
getting 80%, and then it's a sliding scale down to 80-20, and then it slides down over the years depending on what you sell, and you're kind of stuck, and you can't even set the price.
Oh, wow.
They set it for you. My understanding is you can go through Draft to Digital. Of course,
Mhm.
all of mine are through ACX or Audible, but Draft to Digital does it apparently. They partner with a company, so I'd recommend that over ACX. Although my experience wasn't bad, it just was a few points where I wanted to remove a couple audiobooks, and they were like, "Nope, you can't," because you basically co-own it with the producer, which
Mm,
makes sense because they did the work for free
yeah.
for the royalties. So it makes sense that they have some rights to it. Those all expire in about a year for me, and I'm going to be real glad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing you might think of is a workbook. It's
Yeah, I had thought about that too. It's the book is kind of a shorter book, and at the end, I also have questions and answers that people can think about and write down. So a whole separate workbook, not so sure that that really makes sense, but maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, in case you do, you can get spiral bound books on Lulu and still publish
Yeah.
them on Amazon, and that's pretty cool. So done that before a couple times for calendars, and it worked for books too.
Oh,
Just
okay.
just
Cool.
thoughts, just thoughts.
Yeah.
Is it available in ebook or paperback or just paperback?
Kindle and paperbook. So
Very
Kindle
good,
ebook, paperback. Yeah.
very good. Yeah, yeah. Kindle's a good place to get it. Lots of people buy on Kindle because it's a popular place. What
Yeah.
does it run? What does it cost?
So the Kindle's only 99 cents. And the paperback's $5.99 because
Okay,
it costs a lot more to produce those and print them.
of course, yes. Lots of pictures or just text.
Not a lot of pictures. No, it's primary. In fact, it's all text except for my picture on the back right there,
Okay,
and then the cover.
okay, very good, very good. Well, do you have any questions for me or any final thoughts?
I don't think so. Nope. So anybody that's listening to this, if you're interested, I'd love it if you'd check out my book or you can get in touch with me.
And how do they get in touch with you?
So my main website is annalaurabrown.com. So that's my actual website. And I don't know if you want to link to the actual book and show notes somewhere or whatever, you could do that. I don't know if you're going to do that, but
I'll have a link to your website in the
okay,
description.
that'll work. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, this has been Richard Lowe, the Writing King, and I'm a ghostwriter, a LinkedIn branding expert, and a writing coach. And thank you for the interview.
Of course.